I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you'd please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Make sure to pass two of those down. Pass that down. That was distributed earlier this evening. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, Council members Gearboss, CO, McClellan, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, and Councilwoman Dillon. Councilwoman Mitchell will be absent this evening. From city staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, Treasurer Bennett, actually is not here, excuse me, Police Chief Rennick, DPW Director Fordyce, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Skull, and Engineer Rubel. The rest of you who are in the audience this evening, we welcome you and we would encourage you to sign in the back to my left. At this time, the Chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
So moved.
As submitted by Ms. Dillon. Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. How about a motion to excuse the absence of our colleague, Kristen Mitchell?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Gearboss, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar to excuse the absence of Councilwoman Mitchell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to the first of three presentations this evening, which is the 2017 Saline Celtic Festival. It seems like it was a long time ago, but I guess it was. But we're delighted to have Terry Murphy and Jeff here. And is Jim Peters?
Jim, yes.
Jim is also, so three members of the executive committee and the current chair and treasurer.
Yes.
Well, we welcome you here this evening, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. The festival had a really good year this year. A really, really good year. We saw over 5,000 people come through the gate on Saturday, which makes that, if not the highest attendance year, one of the highest. We had 70 competing athletes and almost 100 dancers, 300 plus performers, and nearly 400 volunteers this year. Not only was the weather absolutely perfect, but we used targeted social media this year to reach out to a new audience by letting them know they didn't have to be Scots-Irish to be Celtic for a day. And it noticeably changed our demographics a little bit. I don't have specific numbers, but the Celtic Festival was a lot more diverse this year. And we were real happy with that. The craft beer selections put in almost 1,000 people on Friday night. We are slowly getting recognized as a craft beer place, which is a thing. So we had a real good year. We made some changes. We brought back Mr. Pretty Legs. It turns out that people missed that. It was a huge success. Miss Royal was one of our judges, and a good time was had by all. We contracted the Saline Public Schools for a shuttle service this year. Again, keeping the money as local as we can and giving those folks some hours during the summer. They were real appreciative. They had some good feedback, and they have some ideas for changing things up a little bit next year. We invited the 501st Stormtroopers Legion, which was the kilted Star Wars guys you called. They were so thrilled. They're coming back next year. They anticipate having 50 volunteers to work the front gate for us in full Star Wars regalia. The kids and adults alike loved that. We put a live mermaid in the river. She sat there for 11 hours entertaining the kids, and the kids just loved her. We put kilts on the cops, and they looked good, and most of the pictures we saw on social media included at least one kilted Saline police officer. We expanded the Friday night workshops, and we're going to continue to do that. We had 18 sponsors this year that contributed $9,000. We received 2 grants totaling $7,000. We invited a tweener focus group to attend the festival. We're going to be debriefing them in early December. The feedback we got from that age group of like 12 to 14 was they like the festival just the way it is. We'd been asked last year to look into expanding things for them, but they have a few ideas that we're going to talk to them about. The 2017 Saline Celtic Festival cleared $13,000. Staying true to our commitment to keep it local, we kept 97.3% of our spending in Michigan. We're going to be making some more changes in 2018. On Saturday, we will be hosting a full-fledged craft beer festival in our beer tent. We're hoping to have 12 different breweries represented. That will protect us from weather. Celtic Festival attendees don't come out if it's raining. Craft beer festival attendees will show up in a parka in a blizzard. So we're hoping that that will help us balance the weather risk. We're going to continue to tighten our spending guidelines. And next year will mark our 10th year of the Highland Dance Competition. And we're now recognized as one of the top Highland Dance competitions in the Midwest. We're going to double their stage space and their tent space next year and try to hit 200 dancers. Barring a natural disaster, we believe that following next year's festival, the Friends of the Festival will be able to sit down with the city and start finalizing steps to fully separate from the city of Saline, which has been a goal for the last few years. That's it.
Anything you'd like to add, Jeff?
Nope, any questions?
Okay. I just have one question. So 13,000 net positive in terms of financial resources brought into the festival in 2017. What does that take the Friends account up to?
$20,000,
$20,000.
plus or minus a few hundred.
Okay. So $20,000 in reserve to start 2018.
Yep.
Very good. I just have to say, as a member of the executive committee, I do, of course, I show up at the executive committee and give people pats on the back and tell you you're doing a great job and try to be helpful when I can. But 99.9% of the work is done by the executive committee, the co-chairs, and all of the volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
And it is amazing how much passion and energy there is. And I have to say, because people know me down there being Mill Pond Park during the festival on both Friday evening and Saturday during the day, they're apt to come up to me and express disappointment as well as offer praise. And I got many, many compliments about the festival this year. And I have to tell you, something that will stick with me for many years is driving around on my golf cart and stopping near the Boley Bridge when the mermaid was brought out. And those little girls' faces, I mean, it was absolute euphoria. So that was a wonderful addition, and it really warmed the hearts of many young girls in the Saline community.
I would like to share one follow-up email that we got from an attendee this year. As you know, parking is an issue at Mill Pond Park, and most specifically, handicapped, differently abled parking. And so this year we decided the rules are going to be established by the police officers who are standing at the gate. We gave them complete discretion. Anyone who said the police had the discretion to let them into the interior parking at the festival. We got emails from folks, the differently able, letting us know how much they appreciated just being able to say, I have a walker, I'm pulling an air tank. And one woman went so far as to say, I'm in a walker and that park is so smooth and there were no potholes. So the DPW, I made sure that they got that. I mean, because it was just a really nice thing. You know, we get a lot of emails, and those were the ones that really stood out. Was the folks who were like, thank you for letting me park. And it was senior citizens, anyone that, if there was a parking spot, we let them have it. So.
Very good. Questions or comments for our guests? Very good. Well, appreciate your hard work. Kudos to a successful 2017 Saline Celtic Festival. We're looking forward to 2018.
Awesome.
Very
Thank
good. Next up, we have the Saline Main Street presentation, and I'm guessing Jill? Yes, Jill Durnan, our Main Street Board President, will be providing a statement this evening. Jill, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I sent out our little graphic so you guys can see it. I think yours is a bigger version than mine. Your version wouldn't fit in my purse. Our third quarter for Saline Main Street was a very successful one. We're always really busy in the summertime, so July through September we had a lot going on. In the organization team realm of things, we were, I think everyone on the dais should know, we were selected as a semifinalist for the Great American Main Street Awards, which is a national award. We were one of the 10 semifinalists sorry to burst your bubble, we did not make the finals, but we got lots of good feedback on how we may improve for next year, the possibility of getting back into that. And we also submitted to Michigan Main Street that in that 3-month period, we totaled 1,409 volunteer hours from all of our events and teams, and that's about $31,000 in value volunteer hours at $22 an hour, which is a national average for that. So that's what we brought to this community. We also are in the midst of a coordination with the Michigan National Main Street. They're doing a refresh of the 4-point approach. The 4-point approach is our 4 teams, organization, design, promotion, and business development. And they have found over the years that those teams tend to work in silos and don't communicate with each other. So in September, we had our development of how to reach the goal of getting those coming together more often, and also to we have 2 strategic goals for our organization, and then how to keep our work plans and our goals reaching those 2 strategic goals as well. The design team had a busy summer as well. They had, we have a sign grant program that was started in 2017. We awarded our first grant to Mod Squad. We will offer a $500 matching grant to a business that wants to put up new signage in our district. And so we do still have 3 left, but we have a few businesses that are interested in going forward with that. B. Blumen was a great success this year. We know that we do have funds from the city that we're getting from the EDC funds, in addition to the sponsorship, that we will be able to purchase more baskets to expand that program next summer. I think we had about 41 baskets, and we hope to buy another 20 for 2018. So that'll continue to grow. The student art banner project was wonderful. Thank you, Heidi, for all of your help with that. Those banners are still up, and as soon as the holiday ones come up, then we'll sell those banners to the parents who are interested, and then those funds go towards next year's program to help fund the printing of next year's banners. We also had a great collaboration with the Arts and Culture Committee this year with the Art Around Saline project. We started with 4 art projects that were put up downtown, and then the CTAP group, the city, the schools, the chamber, and Main Street had funds, and we put up 5 more throughout downtown. So we have 9 pieces of art downtown, so I think that was a great collaboration and a great way to keep people coming downtown to see art. As always, the promotion team was busy. We had our very successful summer music series. We didn't have a rain out. We had 1 rain delay, actually 2 rain delays, but we talked to the bands, and they are open to having a later start if the weather's going to clear up. So we'll continue to do that next year. We are looking forward to another 10 or 11 week season again next summer. So that work plan is coming to the board tomorrow for approval. We also had a very successful Oktoberfest weekend. The weather was super hot, but it didn't rain, and we sold a lot of beer, so that's always a good thing. We ended up with a higher overall revenue for the event, but we did have some more expenses than we've had in the past, so we've made just netted about $20,000 for our programming after that weekend. So that was a great success and continues to get better every year. And the business development team had come to the city council and gave recommendations for the parking situation in downtown and what we think would be helpful, and we appreciate all of the footwork and legwork you guys did to implement some of those changes. We did have 4 new businesses open in downtown during that 3-month period, which was fantastic, and about $52,000 in private investment into those new businesses that are in downtown. So it was a super busy quarter. I know this quarter is going to be busy as well. We are still in the final search for our executive director. We had phone interviews with 3 of our finalists last week. Didn't help. We still have 3 in-person interviews with them now because we couldn't decide who we liked the best. So that'll be coming up soon. So hopefully we'll get that new person in line, and they'll be the next person to give you guys an update.
Very good. Well, we look forward to working with that individual. Jill, appreciate your presentation this evening. Needless to say, you and your board and volunteers accomplished a lot this quarter, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for the dais for our Main Street Board President? Jill, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too, thanks.
Well, last but not least on the presentation portion of the agenda is the quarterly police report. You should have received a document in your packet dated October the 31st from Police Chief Reddick. And Chief Reddick, we're delighted to have you with us this evening, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I'll go through this relatively quickly because I know you have a long agenda tonight. In the policy and procedure section, the point that I want to point out is that we did implement the community relations policy, which is what we talked about when we were talking about the police advisory committee. That does have a component in there that allows for the police chief to assign members to a committee to look at different aspects of the police department. So that policy is now in place. I want to also point out that there are now 28 agencies in the state of Michigan who are Lexipol agencies. When we began the process almost 2 years ago, there were only 10. So that progress continues, and people are really seeing the value of having a policy management company. Communication throughout this quarter has remained relatively the same. We do the same things that we've been doing. Other than having the roll call and dispatch, I think that's been a very, very positive thing. Dispatchers get to participate in the roll call, something they hadn't been doing at the first part. The only audit that we did this quarter was the audit of the first aid kit, and those supplies have been all refreshed. And we also used the audit for the officer equipment to replace that equipment, and that will be ongoing. As shirts wear out or as bullet-resistant vests expire, those are being replaced by that schedule. Training, as you can see, Sergeant Mag graduated from the School of Police Staff and Command, so now your entire command staff has gone to and successfully graduated from the School of Police Staff and Command. Sergeant Hartwig is currently in the Saline Leadership Institute. All members of your department are CPR and AED trained and renewed again. We continue to use Police One, which is a great online resource for the police department to get online training. I attended a couple of presentations on human trafficking and cybersecurity. As you can see down in the additional, the police department provided additional law enforcement for the Celtic Festival, and yes, I was one of the ones who actually wore a kilt this year. Interesting. It was very well received, and the officers who participated in that said that it was very well received, as was reported to you just a few minutes ago. We also did the Summer Music Series, Summerfest, Oktoberfest, and the Michigan International Speedway weekends, with relatively minor problems at all of those events, which is a lot to say about our community. Police Department total activity, 15,000 activities, and you have those activities on a separate sheet that show what those are, and they're explained what those activities are. And once again, even though it wasn't as significant as previous quarters, major crime down another 2% this quarter. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Rennick. Are there questions for our police chief? Ms. Dillon, please.
Yes. The daily training bulletins, are they being completed by all employees? Are they being tracked?
They are being tracked, and yes, they are by all employees.
Fantastic. And then on the police activity, it shows that 37 parking tickets were issued in the quarter. Do you know approximately how much time is spent on parking?
Well, I think when I did the study, it's between 40 and 45 minutes a day is what it takes for an officer to go out, go through the lots, mark the tires, and then go back out again later on in the afternoon. So we're looking at roughly a little over an hour each day that takes.
Okay. And then it also mentioned that there were 2 incidences where the lockup was used. I thought we weren't using the lockup anymore.
We are still using the lockup when the officer remains in the building. In other words, the prisoner is never left here with just a dispatcher watching. So if a person arrests somebody, they need to put them into the lockup while they're here, maybe doing paperwork or, getting a hold of the prosecutor or whatever. If they're put into our cell, we count that as a person being put in lockup. But they're never here alone like they used to be.
Oh, thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
That's all. Thank you.
Additional questions for our police chief? Chief Rennick, thank you for your presentations this evening. We regret that you won't be joining us in the future to give another quarterly report, but we thank you for your service and, more importantly, a 40-plus year career in public safety. It's pretty amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on the agenda, we come to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment and question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments?
Good evening. My name is John Coleman. I live at 213 Monroe Street. I am here to speak in opposition to the Parks Commission recommendation to build additional parking at Peoples Park. One role of government is to balance the supply and demand of city amenities with citizen desires. Most people use this balance to determine how they define quality of life in their city. For Peoples Park, the supply of amenities is clear. There's a baseball diamond, there's a basketball court, 2 tennis courts, green space, and on-street parking for more than 30 vehicles. Over the past 6 months, the Parks Commission has discussed Peoples Park extensively with the community. Through this, in all meetings, people have advocated for all the existing amenities in the park, and no one outside city employees have advocated for additional parking at this location. The Commission's process has clearly shown that demand for the existing amenities as they stand far exceeds demand for additional parking at Peoples Park. Of the actions considered by the Commission, their recommendation is sound. However, maintaining existing amenities by taking no action is also a choice I believe Council should consider. If the City feels obligated to use available funds for improvement of the park system, maintaining existing infrastructure at all parks appears to be a more prudent approach than building new infrastructure that will require ongoing maintenance where there appears to be little demand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there additional citizen comments on agenda items? No, then we'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to public hearing, agenda item 17-183. This is a special land use for Sauk Trail Court to allow for a 3-story hotel. There are 2 motions. Motion A will begin with a motion to open the public hearing to afford the public an opportunity to comment on this issue.
Move to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh, and that's seconded by Councilmember Seo. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Public hearing is now open. If there's anyone who would like to speak to this issue, you may come to the podium at this time.
Move to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing. I'm sorry, I didn't acknowledge the time on the first motion. Let's say Gearbaugh moved to open the public hearing at 7:51 and move to close at 7:52. Is there a second to close? Seconded again by Mr. Seo. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The public hearing is now closed. The motion will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 9th, 2017 memo from the Saline Planning Commission and to approve or not to approve the special land use to allow for a 3-story hotel, 43-foot high hotel.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. McClellan. Mr. Rubel, do you care to make any comments, sir? We also have the applicant here. I'll acknowledge Mr. Kirkendall.
Right.
Mark, if you'd like to make a statement, we would welcome that as well.
I was going to introduce Mr. Mark Kirkendall. He's the managing partner of the Best Western Premier Project Group. And as you know, this measure went to the Planning Commission and was discussed and recommended for approval by the City Council. They also approved the preliminary site plan. The good news is that today, the applicant submitted both the engineering site plan review request and also the final site plan request and full sets of final site plans. So they were ready. And so it has been scheduled for hearing on December 13th. So the applicants are moving in quick fashion, and we also in quick fashion will perform the reviews and reports back to the Planning Commission.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Rubel. Mr. Kirkendall, do you care to make any statement this evening?
No, I don't think I need to.
Very good. Well, we appreciate you being here. Discussion on the motion. Or any questions for Mr. Rubel? Excuse me, I should ask for questions first. Ms. Dillon.
In the motion, it acknowledges 43 feet high. The building's actually going to be slightly taller than that. And then I thought somewhere it mentioned 45, and then I know there was a recommendation, I believe, from the planners at 55. So are we going with 43 as a cap? Because
Well,
in
it's
the
43 and a few inches. The ordinance is 45 feet. The 55 foot was a typo. because it was 55 in the I-2 zone, but it was rezoned to SPA 1. Hotel height was amended recently in section 4 of the ordinance, so the exemption height was set at 45 feet. Actually, that was actually approved by city council vote. Mr. Gilboa, I believe, is the one who negotiated the 45 feet, down from 55 feet. So that transpired several months ago, and so, but the typo carried over from the I-2 zoning.
Okay. So there is no question or problem with the fact that in the motion it clearly states 43 feet, and it is 43 feet plus?
Well, it's a few inches over 43 feet, but the land undulates, so the average grade actually is less in some places and more in some places, but it's the...
But the wording
It's
is not
the
an
average,
issue.
no, the wording shouldn't preclude any action.
Okay. And then my next question is, there was something, a recommendation where it talked about impacts such as police and fire in relation to the tax base benefit. It was mentioned twice. Has that been satisfied?
Correct, that was discussed also at Planning Commission. There were subsequent email responses from both the police department and the fire department that came after Mr. Atkin had time to finish the report. But both the fire chief and the police chief confirmed in emails that they have adequate forces and training to address any emergency needs they had, either fire or police, from their current, training curriculums.
Thank you very much.
Additional questions from the dais? Mr. Seal?
Would it, I guess this is more a question for my council colleagues. Should I amend the resolution to say between 43 and 44 feet?
I don't believe that it's necessary, but it's,
I'm fine, because of the average height, that is the issue. It depends on when you're measuring it for those couple extra
Yeah.
inches.
And there are cupolas on the roof and mechanical equipment, and so there's, cowling around those, so, a definitive number doesn't mean much when you have variations in height and trim and so forth.
additional comments or questions? Mr. Gearbox?
Just a comment about the fire and police protection. The hotel will have fire suppression system in it, and also because we have mutual aid with Pittsfield, we'll be having access to their ladder trucks, so the height thing will be addressed so that way.
Any additional thoughts? Then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Seal, seconded by McClellan to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to motion B. This is special land use for Sauk Trail Court to allow a hotel in SBA 1 zone. Again, the first motion will be a motion to open the public hearing at 7:57 p.m.
Move to open the public hearing.
Moved by Gearbox. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. I'll get you on the next one, Councilwoman McClellan. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Public hearing is now open, affording anyone from the public the opportunity to speak to this issue.
Move to close.
Moved to close by McClellan at 7:58 and seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. The third and final motion will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 9th, 2017 memo from the Saline Planning Commission and to approve or not to approve the special land use to allow a hotel in SBA 1 zone.
Move to acknowledge and to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Mr. Rubel, any additional comments this evening?
No, sir.
No? Mr. Kirkendall, I'll offer you the same opportunity? No? We're good? Any discussion from the dais? Then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar to acknowledge the receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mark. We move on now to unfinished business, item 17-179. This is People's Park parking lot recommendations. The chair is actually going to first ask for a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 8th, 2017 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel.
So moved.
Moved by Gearboss. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Seal. Mr. Rubel and Director Scruggs, do you want to come to the podium and maybe elaborate on the discussion we had a few weeks ago, and then we'll open it up for questions? Sound good?
Well, I guess we're back because a decision was not made or whatnot at the last meeting. And Gary did the research on the questions that you had. And I guess we're here to answer any additional questions you might have.
Mr. Rubel, do you care to make any additional statement other than what you expressed in your memorandum?
Well, in an effort to answer the questions, we did a little extra engineering and background search work. And so that enabled us to provide an updated estimate. The estimate that had been provided was actually an earlier guesstimate, you might say, not based on full purview of the project. Not all the information was in, but it was the best we had at the time because we had to give it in quick fashion we were asked in quick fashion to give it to one of the board meetings with the Parks Commission. So only one other new item came up since then when someone questioned the removal of the acrylic surface. Really, that's the only change in the estimate.
Questions for our Parks and Rec Director or our City Engineer? Mr. Gearba, I'll start with you.
Just real quick, so we didn't identify on here the cost of a new tennis court. What would that be if we even estimated it?
That I don't know right now. I've been trying to get some estimates from some companies and from other communities that have recently installed tennis courts, and I'm not having any luck right now. I made contact with, I think it was a sport court out of Ohio, and have left a couple of messages, and I don't have any estimates at this time.
Would there be an issue if we did not put a new tennis court in there in terms of what we have available for facilities in our other parks?
I think that a tennis court is a necessary amenity in that court, or in that area. We had a lot of, when we were having discussions with the community and whatnot, a lot of people do use the tennis courts down there. My recommendation, and after discussion with the Park Commission, we felt like one court would be sufficient, not having to build two courts, but one court would be plenty.
And if we were to restore the tennis court that's there now, because it does need work, correct? It's cracked
Yes.
and everything?
Yes.
Any estimate on?
Cost estimate on that I don't have. I
Would it
can
be
tell you
complete
that
replacement of the?
the last time we did crack filling, typically the cracks need to be within a certain, measurement. These cracks are very large. I'm not sure if they could really fill them very easily and make them still playable. I think that really at this point, last time that we had People's Park done, it was about $10,000 just to crack, fill, and resurface.
And it's heaved too, hasn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
There's
So
some- yeah,
if you were to
uneven.
put a parking lot in there, would you crush it up any at all, or just put the layer on top of it?
Well, all we need is just about a half-inch mill of the acrylic surface, and that would smooth it.
Okay.
And then an inch and a half overlay of asphalt would coat it similar as to what we did parking lot 4 recently, and basically any street you do a mill and overlay.
Okay. So.
And it
got
does work well because any problem that's underneath would have probably settled over time by now, so at least the subgrade is probably more stable, and then an overlay would keep its shape much, much longer.
Okay. So in essence, we would be, if we didn't build the second court, the new court, I guess I'd say, we would still maintain the green space that is there at this point, but yet we would turn basically a hard surface into another hard surface, but just for a different purpose use.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're good, Mr. Gearba?
Yes.
I think I saw a hand. Ms. Dillon?
I guess the second part of the cost estimate on the tennis court would be, what would be our time frame for replacing that tennis court?
It would be, as soon as possible. We wouldn't want to not have that amenity, so we'd want to kind of parlay the parking lot and a tennis court at the same time.
Okay. So I'm very concerned about the fact that you've mentioned that the courts are used and that you want to replace it immediately, but yet you're willing to give it up for parking that's used on a very limited basis. So I'm really struggling with that, that we're giving up an amenity that we have. And yes, it may need some restoration, as everything does, but we're giving that up to an unknown of, we know it's going to be reduced, even if we do something, and we don't know the cost of it, and we don't have a time frame for it. So we're, once again, removing an amenity.
Well, the condition of the courts are not good at all. I mean, the cracks are very wide and they're uneven. It's my belief that in order to resurface those and to restore them to good playable condition, it's going to be more expensive than trying to build a new court. We're not trying to give up an amenity, and that was one thing that the Park Commission did voice, is that we don't want to lose the amenity. We feel that that is an important part of the park. We did lose parking when we sold the Karpinski property. We did have parking available. We don't have that parking available any longer. And one of the things that, one of the thoughts from the Park Commission was obviously safety, cost, hold on, I have 3 words here. Safety, function, and cost. And primarily safety is our number one thing. It's felt that on-street parking for people to come into the park on the street and have kids cross over the street is not as safe as having parking in the park. So it was kind of the thought pattern, you know, we sat down and weighed pros and cons. We really looked at all of those things, safety, function, and cost, and felt that this was the best option that brought all those to the
I
council.
appreciate that. Now, has Sabies been approached about contributing to the cost, since they are really the primary benefactor from this parking lot?
No,
So,
I don't believe that they're the primary parkers at the park. There's a lot of other people that use the park, other than just SAYBNS. SAYBNS was at our Park Commission meetings to give input, to answer questions, and so on and so forth.
was there any studies done as to the number of cars, the time frame, and to where it even led to this? I understand there's issues. There was concern about on-street parking. And, I mean, that's a whole element in and of itself that the city could deal with by striping, putting in speed bumps. There are a lot of mechanisms that could be put into place for that. I guess what I want to know is how we jumped from a want to a need for parking.
Well, I believe the need for parking was that we took the parking away that was at People's Park when we sold the Karpinski property.
But there weren't 30-some-odd parking spaces there, were there?
Yes.
Yeah, there was.
Quite a few.
And they're parking at Annie's as well.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the issue too, is that, you know, if we do nothing, like it or not, people are going to park at Annie's, and that's private property, and, you know, that's not fair to her property without having some kind of arrangement for her. So this is kind of a compromise situation to.
Yeah, and obviously, we did have a lot of discussion with Deb Barnes, brought her into the discussion as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Additional comments, questions for staff? Mr. Gearbox.
Regarding the location of a new tennis court, is there any other place it would be located other than, I think you're just talking about putting it on the other side of the parking lot, isn't it?
Other side of the basketball,
Okay.
yeah.
It's-
And the basketball is a used amenity as well. That's like a half court.
Okay.
Before we vote, thank you both for your comments this evening and your work on this. I also want to acknowledge again and thank my council colleague, our council colleague, Heidi McClellan, who's the liaison to the Parks Commission, for her work on this and for the thoughtful deliberations that the Parks Commission has had on this matter. Needless to say, they took their time. They understood that this is a serious issue, and that changes will have an impact on the park and on the neighborhood and the individuals that utilize this space. I will say, for the record, prior to voting on the recommendation, I am in favor of transitioning the tennis courts from tennis courts to a parking lot. I'm somewhat ambivalent on the creation of an additional tennis court. Now, I accept the notion that there are those who are concerned that we are losing an amenity, but at the same time, that amenity does exist elsewhere in the city of Saline. We have tennis courts at Wilderness Park, very nice tennis courts adjacent to the recreation center, and it should be a commitment of all of us to continue to direct people to that facility to make sure it is well utilized by the community. So I can really go either way on this, but as a matter of as it relates to public safety, I think it is important that we implement permanent parking at People's Park.
The other tennis courts at Curtis Park, not Wilderness.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
My mistake. Additional questions, comments for staff? Then we're going to proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by, is it Gearba?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Couldn't read my own handwriting. Seconded by CO to acknowledge receipt of the November 8th, 2017 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Next would be a motion to approve
That
or
was
not
a
to approve.
motion only to acknowledge, I thought.
That was a motion, only to acknowledge.
Only to acknowledge?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I'm entertaining a motion to approve or not to approve the recommendation of the Parks Commission to convert the existing tennis courts at People's Park to a parking lot and to build a new tennis court south of the basketball court, or an amended motion, whatever's your pleasure.
Move to approve is submitted.
Okay, moved by Seal, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by McClellan. Discussion. Mr. Seal.
I guess I too agree with the fact that there is a need for parking there. Back many years ago when my son played baseball, there was always difficulty, and I think that led finally to an agreement with the Karpinski family to actually pay them to allow users of the park to park on their property. As has been stated, that parking opportunity was lost when the Karpinski property was sold. I know during my tenure as a police officer with the city, there were often complaints about people parking on the other private property there because there was a parking lot readily available. People assumed that they could park there to use the park, which was not the case. So that's long been a bone of contention, and I believe that there is a need for parking in that park. So that's why I'm moving this forward.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seal. Ms. McClellan.
Yeah, as to the discussion about the additional tennis courts, I don't know what if we want to remove that portion of the motion to have that come up later, once we have a hard plan for that. I would be amenable to that, but
Well, based on the motion that was moved by
Was
Seals.
already on that
yeah,
motion,
Yeah, we've got it on the table to not only construct a parking lot on the existing tennis courts, but then to create a new tennis court. So. Anything further? No. Mr. Gearbox.
I'm supportive, I guess, of the parking lot because we did make the decision to sell the Kapinski property. Whether that will come back to us is still up to debate, depending on if the developer ever does anything with it or if we decide to take other legal measures on it, so that may come back. My concern with putting in the new tennis court is, one, we don't have a cost yet, and understanding that is, but what is the condition of our other tennis courts? I'm almost rather see money be put into those courts, maintain that they're maintained. We have a new parking lot and leave the green space, which I seem to be recalling as an issue with a lot of the neighbors.
Do you want to comment on the existing tennis courts in our infrastructure, or Mr. Fordyce? My understanding is the ones at Teff Park, the rec center, one, are well used and two, are in pretty good shape. I would guess that the tennis courts in Curtis Park are in need of some attention. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Okay.
Rec center courts are in good shape. We had, in 2008, we put a very expensive overlay over them. It's called a sport court, and that served us very well. So cracks will never come through. You'll never see those. So it was a very good thing.
What is the intent with the future plans for Curtis Park tennis courts? Are those?
That's why I asked Jeff the condition of the court.
Yeah, Curtis Park tennis courts are in a difficult location.
It's going to flood.
They
so.
frequently flood, and so in addition to the debris that flooding brings onto the courts, it also messes up the epoxy coating The crack repairs that we've done there in the past, when those get wet, they fail faster. So, if we want to maintain tennis facilities in the city, I suggest we do it somewhere other than a floodplain.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to use as a support for this, that we
Yeah,
probably would look at maybe not redoing the ones in Curtis Park and putting the ones here in
I
Peoples
think
instead.
that's,
Yeah, location's not good.
I'm sort of also amenable to that, if we can achieve sort of a, for lack of a better way to articulate it, a zero-sum game. If we put money into one, I would prefer that in the future, maybe to forego additional resources.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to support in my understanding of this, because I would rather maintain the green space, because that's what everybody's talking about, but we could improve the space at the park and not necessarily have the continued potential of problems with that Curtis Park. And that's been for years, I know that, so, okay. Thank you.
Additional comments? Mr. Hart?
If an additional, it's a question, if an additional tennis court is built in People's Park, would the approval for the funding for that come back to us?
Yes.
So even if we approve this as it's been moved and seconded,
You'll get another bite at the apple.
it's not our last chance to influence the outcome.
Correct.
Okay, thank
No,
you.
good point. Thank you for sharing. Additional comments, discussion? Then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by McClellan to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it, the motion carries. We move on to unfinished business, item 15-224. This is Vanessa Court dedication and acceptance of public streets. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 9th, 2017 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel and to approve and accept or not to approve the dedication of Vanessa Court and Bennett right-of-ways as public streets and to approve or not to approve the Act 51 street resolution.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and to approve.
Actually, I got to have you acknowledge, approve, and accept, Mr. Gearbaugh, if you're amenable to that.
Oh, yeah, I guess that wasn't written there.
Okay, so Gearbaugh moves to acknowledge receipt, approve and accept, and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. Mr. Rubel, do you care to make any comment this evening? And I would also note for the record, we do have some residents of that street, that neighborhood with us this evening. Gentlemen, we welcome you here. Appreciate your attendance. Mr. Rubel.
Right, three gentlemen attending tonight. One is President of the Homeowners Association, Jared Felkowski, and Vice President and Secretary David Muse. And David led the negotiation on the final outcome of the closing out of the improvements there, and they were very cooperative, as you can see in the memo, and they did respond favorably and accomplish those items that needed repair to the trees and the signs, and they had arranged already with Detroit Edison to pay for the installation of the street lights, and those are in. I'm not sure if they've been powered up yet by Detroit Edison, but they're ready to be powered up, and because once accepted as a public street, then they become a public street lighting system, so it's sort of a touch and go there, except as a street that activates the street light system, gets it on the maintenance schedule and powers it up, all at the same motion. The measure first came to us 2 years ago on the acceptance. Not everything was completed, but now all the homes are completed on Vanessa Court, as well as very nice improvements. You can see Mr. Very does a very nice polished product of landscaping, turf, very nice small neighborhood. And so I did the last minute inspection late this evening to make sure all those improvements actually were in place. That transpired late last week after we actually had drafted the memo. And everything seems to be in order for acceptance at this point.
Very good. Well, that neighborhood, that development is very attractive. I like it very much. I like the look, the feel, the density, and you're right, Mr. Very does outstanding work. I'm particularly impressed with the new sidewalk that leads down to Mill Pond Park. Now, I'm cognizant of the fact that we're probably this next spring going to have to make an investment and connect that sidewalk with the existing pathway. But having a sidewalk that leads down to Mill Pond Park is a tangible thing for the city and its residents. So very happy to consider this motion. Are there questions for our city engineer or staff? Mr. Rubel, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. CO.
I just want to state that I've always said, and I continue to say, that I think it's on a good public policy wherever possible to have these streets dedicated as public streets. Most of the residents, I think, when they buy into a subdivision like that, many of them are not aware of the full impact of it potentially being a private street in the future. And they pay the same taxes as everybody else in the city based on the value of their property. And I believe they should be entitled to the same privileges that taxation allows for the rest of the community. That is plowing of the streets and pay for the street lighting and so on. So I'm happy to support this.
Mr. Gearbox?
I just want to commend you on doing this approach after the construction's done, because then everyone understood exactly whose responsibilities are where, and that the work was done, so we didn't have to worry about potential destruction to the road or whatever. I think if we do this in the future, for whatever developments, I prefer adopting them after the construction's done. I think this worked really well.
To stay on that point for just a minute, does anybody disagree or reject the approach that we followed with Vanessa Court, which is different than what the city has utilized in the past, which is to review and to approve the dedication subsequent to the development being completed? And I think that's the approach to follow in the future. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Rubel. Appreciate it. It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by CO to acknowledge, to approve and accept, and to approve the dedication of Vanessa Court. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. We move on to new business item 17-184. This is 2018 community event waiver of fees. This is an item we discussed at a recent work meeting. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 24th, 2017 memo from Clerk Royal and to approve or not to approve the 2018 community event waiver of fees as submitted.
Move to acknowledge and to approve.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Clerk Royal, do you have any additional comments to make at this time?
No.
Not unless there are questions. Questions from the dais? No questions, then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-186. This is Walmart grant application. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 7th, 2017 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and to approve or not to approve the request to apply for Walmart Foundation Community a grant in the amount of $2,500 for the Rec on the Go program.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Ms. McClellan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Excuse me. Director Scruggs, the floor is yours.
The Walmart grant became, we were made aware of this grant just a few weeks ago. We were also made aware of the Building Healthy Communities grant through MParks at the same time. That one was due early November, and we applied for that. That would be, we would try to leverage that grant and this grant together to cover the cost for the Rec on the Go for this upcoming year.
Very good.
So it aligns with all their, funding areas and their mission and everything, so it's a good opportunity.
Rec on the Go is a very valuable program. I've tried to champion it for many years, and so I think it's critically important that it is implemented and offered to our citizens in 2018, so thank you for your work on this. Are there questions for Director Scruggs? Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, I support the grant application. I assume it's just a typo in your memo when it says the deadline to apply is December 31, 2018.
2017, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Just.
Thank
The
you.
correction will be made without
That's
objection.
for next year's. I'm getting it both at the same
All
time.
right, good plan.
She's a good proofreader. Yeah. Additional questions or comments for our Parks and Rec Director? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by McClellan, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-187. This is Rec Center rules and policies. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 7th, 2017 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and to approve or not to approve the changes to the Rec Center rules and policies.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Just to acknowledge receipt, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yeah.
Thank you. You're comfortable seconding that, Ms. Dillon?
Yes.
Okay. Director Scruggs, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You were provided a red line edition of the rule changes. Essentially, we haven't updated our rules for about 3 or 4 years now. It was time to go through and basically clean up some of the language, add some additional rules that are more significant today, such as we included no smoking, but we didn't include tobacco products or vaping, which is kind of a new concept. and clarified some of the rules that we had created when we initiated some of the new rules and policies in 2014. For example, the family extension plan. So as we lived through the past 3 or 4 years, some questions came up that we realized that we needed to add into our rules to be a little bit more clear. So it's just kind of updating, polishing up the rules, and so no significant changes.
Very good. Thank you, Director Scruggs. I know these are sort of not particularly glamorous or sexy things that you work on, but it is important. So we appreciate your work. Are there questions for our Parks and Rec Director? Ms. Dillon?
I do have quite a few. I'll start with one to Mr. Campbell, which is, has this been run through legal counsel?
I don't believe that it has.
It was originally, when we updated them the last time, so I believe it was Steve Gerard that had reviewed.
The most recent?
Yes.
Okay.
And so he did review them, gave us some good language, and so these are just minor changes, so it was reviewed.
So he's reviewed all these red lines? that
Not
are
these
current?
red lines, no.
Okay.
No.
I think some of them are going to need to be reviewed prior to being finalized. There's certain languages about controlled substances, which there are legally prescribed controlled substances, so that really needs to be differentiated, I would assume. There's mention of city parks, but it's not a defined term. There's just a lot of things like.
Can you tell me what pages you're looking at?
City parks was an added term. It's on page 6. It's in red. Controlled substances is also on that same page.
Yeah, it is controlled substances. That is part of our ordinance. So we had it on the rec center property, but the rec center is in Teft Park, which is a city park.
Right.
And that's the same rule throughout all of our parks.
Right, but it's not a defined term to, I guess I would just feel better. There's also comments on page 7, it talks about independent contractors, but they're independent contractors, it doesn't define as to who hired them, whether they're contractors of the rec center or of individuals.
Page 7, and is that where are you looking? In the middle?
Okay, let's see.
Or what's the first couple of words?
Let's see. Let's see where it is. Okay, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th paragraph that starts with instruction of any kind.
Yeah, we
says-
do have independent contractors that work for us. For example, tennis instructors, aerobic fitness instructors. And that was one of the, we didn't make any changes to that.
Right.
That was an
I'm just
approved-
saying, though, it seems as though it could be ambivalent as to who hired the independent, like if somebody were to bring their own contractor in for lessons.
Well, that's in our rules. I would have to take a look, but we don't allow any other people to come in and teach unless there are
Right.
employee or independent contractor.
Okay.
So private instruction is not allowed.
Okay. And then there was another one that was sort of the, page 28, the locker room rules. It says guests must use their respective locker rooms. What exactly does that mean?
So boys go into the boys' locker room or men's locker room. Girls go into the women's locker room at age of 4, or I'm sorry, at age of 5. So 4 to 9, they're eligible to go, say you brought your son in and he's 4 years old, he can go into the family locker room. Once they reach 5, once they reach 5, you wouldn't take him into the women's locker room. So so for example, you have a 2-year-old
I
boy,
understand
you
what
can
you're
go into the
saying.
women's locker room with him.
Right.
And then once they reach say 4 years old, between 4 and 9, you should take your son into the family locker room.
Right. I guess what I'm getting at is, does this create some sort of an issue if there's some sort of gender identity issues? Will that become an issue?
Not an issue for us, no.
Okay. And then the one that talks about the no cameras, cell phones are prohibited, in any locker room or restroom. Are you going to have a sign at the door that says people have to leave their cell phones in their cars?
We don't ask that they leave them in the car, they just are not allowed to use them. So if you locked it up in your locker, that's
But it's saying
perfectly
that it's
fine.
prohibited in any locker room. It's just saying that cameras, cell phones, or any devices capable of taking still or video pictures are prohibited in any locker room.
So maybe that's a good point, that they're not to be used
Okay.
while they're in the locker room.
Okay.
That
Okay.
change can be made without objection.
Okay. I still would be in favor of legal counsel looking through the.
Yeah,
wording.
no, I think City Manager Campbell and I just spoke, and I think when we entertain the subsequent motion, we would add an addendum contingent upon review and approval by the City Attorney's Office.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Director Scruggs? Ms. Scruggs, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Is there any subsequent discussion on the motion to acknowledge receipt? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion to approve or not to approve the changes to the Saline Rec Center rules and policies contingent upon review and approval by the City Attorney's Office?
So moved.
Moved by Gearba, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. Discussion. Mr. Gearba.
Yeah, I just prefer the review too. I think we're consistent with doing that in all our policies and procedures, so it never hurts to have it. We pay a retainer fee, may as well do it.
Additional comments? Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-188. This is asset management software. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 8th, 2017 memo from DPW Director Fordyce and to approve or not to approve the purchase of Lucidity Asset and Work Management Software Installation and Training Services in the amount of $3,845. And if I mispronounced that, my apologies.
Pretty close.
Mr. Fordyce, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I need a motion. My faux pas.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Second.
Moved by Tahar, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, seconded by McClellan. Thank you for catching that. My mistake. Mr. Fordyce, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The proposal tonight is to purchase asset management software. This is in a work management program. This is a software package that will link our expanding GIS system with a work order system and a maintenance planning and kind of a work record system. So all this information will be in one place on a map-based system. So you can go into a piece of water main and you be able to pull up the records on any repairs that have made on that stretch of water main, or hydrant flushing. When's the last time this hydrant was flushed? When's the last time it was greased? The pumps within the wastewater plant, all the mechanical equipment within the wastewater plant will be included in this, so we can have a solid record of what's been done and a program of what needs to be done in the future. One of the main purposes of the SAW grant is to create a comprehensive asset management program for wastewater and stormwater. And part of that is looking at each of your components, determining its useful life, where are you currently in that useful life, evaluating the risk of failure of that component, and then deciding what kind of replacement schedule you need, what kind of maintenance schedule you need. And this kind of software package is kind of the component that pulls all that together in one easily digestible place. Another feature of this is that it includes mobile systems. So we'll be able to also, under the grant, purchase, we haven't decided what format yet, whether it'll be a rugged laptop or a tablet or an iPad type thing or what, but we'll have mobile devices that will allow DPW crews to bring this information out into the field, so that when we're working on underground utilities and something doesn't make sense, in the field we'll be able to pull up these maps and zoom in on things and see where the underground facilities are and what has been done in the past. So it's really kind of a, once we fully incorporate it, it will be an all-encompassing tool. This will be the tool that essentially runs the Public Works Department and the maintenance aspects of the wastewater plant. And so we did, we're working with Tetra Tech on the SAW grant, and they reviewed the available software packages, gave us a summary of the main players and their pricing structures. And then we elected to do an in-depth review of one of those that made sense for us, both in terms of the features it offered and their pricing structure. Their price structure is heavy at the front end and light in the maintenance, and the grant pays 90% of the front end costs. Whereas some of the other ones were heavier at the front end and heavy with ongoing, and then another had significantly higher ongoing expenses. And those ongoing expenses will just be a budget item for the city.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fordyce. It sounds like this technology would be, well, invaluable, I think is the best way to describe it. So we appreciate your work on this. Questions for our DPW director? We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, thank you. So I thank you for the laying out the budgetary implications of the various options. My question has to do with what do you anticipate the effort that will be required to get the information into the system to get it up and running and functional?
So most of the GIS, the geographical, the map information is in there already. And one of the, so there's some existing data that will be able to be moved from the GIS into this system, and they'll just kind of use that same data. To have all of it in there is a lot of work. It's just kind of brute force data entry kind of work. But what we can do is start now with today and move forward with that. So we'll have that data in there. We'll have the map data in there, and we can make corrections to the GIS as we go along. So, yeah, the entire history isn't going to quickly be in there. That's going to be kind of an ongoing project of, maybe when we are working on a particular issue, we'll pull the file, and as we put in the new, whatever new maintenance or repair activity just happened, we pull the file and enter in the rest of it. But so that backlog of data is an intensive process.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
And tagging on to Ms. Tahar's statement and question, that's where I'm concerned. We buy software and we do these type of things, and it's that effort to put all that additional information in there that we don't dedicate the resources to get that put in place. I agree to put the software in, but I would like to see some other solution to get this in faster, where you need to talk more, because I don't believe staff, because of all the other commitments and everything else, this is just like anything else.
Yeah.
It's got to get in there, so we've got to figure out, and we can't take advantage of it where we would have effective cost savings and process if it isn't in there.
Yeah.
So I would like to see a solution to that piece.
Yeah, we will have advantages from this right from the get-go,
Right.
in terms of just a better work order system. Right now, we're still on a paper work order system.
Right.
So having an electronic work order system, having the mobile capabilities to bring that data out into the field, those things are going to be very quickly useful. But you're absolutely correct that that data entry process could lag on for a very long time. So I can take that back, and we can look at, I'll consult with Tetra Tech and Lucity and see, what mechanisms are available to do that import.
Yeah, I mean, if it's some other plan, either it's we hire temporary staff that we can train to do something like that, or if it's more technical, we hire somebody to do it, but
Right.
that would be my hope.
I think we can proceed in that direction without objection. In fact, what I would ask Mr. Fordyce is working through the city manager's office, maybe make note, assuming that this motion is approved, that you come back in a couple months to debrief us on implementation and to let us know what additional support, if any, you need from city council to fully integrate this program. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Very good. Additional questions for our DPW director, Ms. Dillon.
Have you had an opportunity to speak with any of the other communities that are currently using this software?
I have not personally, but that was part of Tetra Tech's review to see who was using the various packages and talk to them and see what their level of satisfaction was. So this one was positively reviewed.
Okay. Because I know sometimes we've gotten burned by trying to find the best thing for our budget versus long-term.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where the least expensive one really is the most preferable for, from what I've seen of, the multiple presentations that I took part in of this program and some past presentations of the other larger players. The more expensive ones they're more complicated, they're more complex, and the communities that implement those packages have full-time dedicated GIS staff. They've got people who just run the program, whereas we need to have the program be able to be run by the people who are doing the work. And this Lucity package is much more geared towards a community like ours where we do not have that a full-time GIS department.
And so just to piggyback on what Mr. Gearbaugh had said, do you have any kind of benchmark timetables as to what you anticipate having input at what time? I mean, are you going to do it sort of the sidewalk method, which is, break the city into quadrants? Are you doing main roads? And
Well, so initially, we're only going to be doing stormwater and sanitary, because that's what the SAW grant pays for. So we will get the package, and that's another advantage of this package, is all the modules come with it, whereas the other ones you pay individually for a sidewalk module, for a water module, for a sanitary module. This one is just one package, and when you're ready to use one, you just open it up and start entering data in that one. So we're going to get the training with our stormwater and sanitary systems and the data we have there, and get that linked with the GIS. And then we're going to just keep rolling. We're going to implement the work order system, so those aspects will start getting recorded in the system. And as we just discussed, we'll figure out a faster way to get in the historic data.
okay,
So,
thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Fordyce, thank you. Any subsequent, actually, hang tight because you're up next.
Yep.
Any additional discussion on the motion? No, that's been properly moved by Tahar, seconded by McClellan to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-189. This is roof repairs at Rentschler Farm Hog House. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 8th, 2017 memo from DPW Director Fordyce and to authorize or not authorize the replacement of the Rentschler Farm Hog House roof with a metal roof with funding to be provided by the Saline Area Historical Society.
I'll move to acknowledge receipt of the memo.
Moved by Gearbutt to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by McClellan. Mr. Fordyce, and I would also acknowledge we have the Historical Society's president, Mr. Doug Elfring, also in the back. Doug, if you want to make a comment at any time, please let me know, and we would be delighted to hear what you have to say. Mr. Fordyce.
thank you.
I'm sorry, and Mr. Peters from the Society Board. Jim, we appreciate your attendance as well.
So previously, council had approved the city's support of a certified local government grant through the State Historic Preservation Office that the Saline Area Historical Society was preparing. While I was working with Mallory Bauer on that application, she had got some price estimates for some of the work that was going to be covered by the grant, and it fairly quickly became apparent that the dollar value really wasn't high enough to warrant the amount of work for that application and the administrative burden that comes with it. It's federal money, so there's a lot of a lot of, I's to dot and T's to cross, and then there's ongoing commitments after receiving the money in perpetuity. So we elected to pass on that round of applications and look for a faster way to facilitate repairs to the hog barn and the chicken coop. So we've met, I met with the society a couple of weeks ago to try to hash out a 3 to 5 year maintenance plan for the farm. We didn't quite get to the 5-year point in that meeting, but we did come to agreement that we would apply for CLG grant in the 2018 round for the salvage barn. The salvage barn had been studied in the condition assessment report, which was our previous CLG grant, and also structural repair drawings were prepared for the salvage barn. So that is pretty much teed up and ready to go for a grant application. We need to get some updated cost estimates for that, but pretty much we have the information we need for that. And that is of a dollar figure that I think warrants the challenges of a CLG grant. We also talked about the hog barn and how to quickly preserve it. Maybe not repair it, but preserve it. So the society funded a barn expert, Ted Micah, who's been working on this farm for decades, doing repairs both for the Renchlers and for the city and for the society. And he came out and reviewed the barn and the chicken coop, and he designed kind of on the fly there, designed an internal bracing system for the hog barn. And one of the issues with it is that it's leaning. And the lean has increased recently. But it's not so far that it's imminently going to collapse. So this bracing structure designed by our barn expert was installed by Mr. Peters. And then we talked about the idea of just putting a new roof on it to keep water out of it. The current roof is in very bad shape. And preserving it as is for the time being. There was the condition assessment report had recommended foundation repairs. Mr. Micah, I think, had a differing opinion on the extent of foundation repairs that were needed. There was discussion on how to go about straightening the building and whether or not this current bracing system would interfere with that. And yes, it will. The current bracing system will have to be removed before the building is straightened. But that was an afternoon of work to install that system. So backing that out to straighten it at a later date is not a significant issue. So what's before you today is the new roof. Putting a solid roof on this barn to keep water out of it, preserve the structure. And the society met on Saturday to review quotes that Ms. Bauer had collected, and they selected, which is not in your information at this point, tip-top shape roofing for a price of $4,275. And they approved use of the funds that they had set aside for the grant match to pay for this roof. So at this point, this is no cost to the city, but it is obviously city property, so you need to authorize the work.
Very good. Gentlemen, do you care to make any statement at this time? Mr. Elfring, Mr. Peters, anything you'd like to add? You good? Okay. Well, thank you all for your work on this. I'm eager to just get this done.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why some of the information is not in your memo, because we kind of had overlapping meeting schedules and we were trying to get this facilitated before winter.
I understand that. Yeah, let's move expeditiously on this. I agree. There are comments or questions for our DPW director? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just quick, because I'm on the Treasury Board, I won't necessarily be voting on this, but just to give you, I'm the treasurer for the Historical Board. Just a comment, there's a lot of discussion going back and forth on whether we should have straightened the barn first, put the roof on. Ted Micah, I believe, was in support of putting the roof on because the roof is so far gone that potentially that could contribute. So I was trying to figure, do you keep and preserve the lean in the building, which is a little bit, or do you straighten it all up and get it all square?
Yeah.
So at this point, because the lean isn't significant enough, we feel that it could straighten up and still be addressed, I believe,
So,
if need be.
yeah. I think maybe there's a little bit of debate about whether we need to straighten it eventually. I think we do. I think it makes sense to straighten it. But how we're going to straighten it and what amount of foundation repair needs to be done at the same time, that's still a bit of a debate. And when we met with Mr. Micah, we came up with the idea of including the straightening of the hog barn and the foundation work there in that CLG grant. So that's, that's work that'll take place 2 to 3 years down the road. But since we've got it stabilized and hopefully we're putting a good roof on it, that barn will be fine for 2 to 3 years, no problem.
Yeah, and that's what, and if I listen to all my farming relatives, that's the thing, if you don't keep a good roof on the building, you'll lose the building.
Yeah.
And so I think we're making the right, smart, and this is the lowest bid out of the three construction companies. It ranged somewhere between $6,500 to $4,200.
Very good. Additional questions for our DPW Director. Ms. Dillon?
So I think Mr. Gearbaugh just asked and the question was answered, but just for clarification, so you're not straightening the building at this point?
Correct.
You're just putting a new roof on. So now, if you decide in the future to straighten it, will that make your roof go out of a line, and would that?
There's a little bit of debate there. One of the roofing contractors, I'm not sure which one, suggested that putting a roof on now and straightening it later would be more difficult, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but we also passed that idea by Ted, and he said it's more important to get the roof on, and it won't be that big a deal when we go to straighten it later. The type of roof we're putting on there is, it's a metal roof, so there's a certain amount of flexibility in there, and I can't say 100% certain we won't have any issues at all when we go to straighten this later, but I can say certainly that we're nowhere near agreement on how to straighten it right now and how much foundation work needs to be done. So I think in the interest of the building, putting this roof on there now and figuring out this somewhat more complex issue of the straightening and the foundation repair later is the best approach for the building.
Okay, because I think that was the second part of my question, which was the not straightening the building at this point, was it a time element or was it a cost factor?
It's more, well, time and decision making, because there's still a little bit of debate on how to go about straightening the building. So ideal world, we would straighten it, put the bracing on, put a new roof on it. Less than ideal world, bracing's already on it. Hopefully we'll put a new roof on it, and then when we put together the CLG grant application, we'll figure out how we're going to go about straightening it.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Then we'll vote on the motion to acknowledge receipt, which is moved by Gearboss, seconded by McClellan. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about now a motion to authorize or not authorize the replacement of the Rensselaer Farm hog house roof with a metal roof with funding to be provided by the Saline Area Historical Society?
Move to authorize.
Thank you,
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem. Who was the second on that? Was that
Second.
McClellan? Thank you, ma'am. Any discussion on the motion? Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay.
And abstain.
And one abstention. Ayes have it, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Fordyce. Gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate your work on this. We move on now to new business item 17-190. This is AECom release and settlement agreement. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 6, 2017 memo from City Manager Campbell and to approve or not to approve the AECom release and settlement agreement, to authorize or not authorize the City Manager to sign the agreement.
I'll move to acknowledge.
Move to acknowledge by Dillon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Gearbaugh. Mr. Campbell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the memo states, so AECom, as you all may recall, worked for the city to design our streetscape that was done as part of the Michigan Ave rehab project. And part of that was, of course, the new decorative lighting. And not only did we rehabilitate our existing decorative lighting downtown, we of course extended from one end of the project to the other, from Maple intersection all the way to the dam. So However, there's the lighting in the downtown is what has the electrical outlets, and part of the redesign from the beginning, when staff began working with AECOM, was to have them solve a problem for us, in that because of the electrical situation and with the GFIs, they would trip when we put a significant number of items, whether it be bounce houses or a lot of the decorative lighting for the Christmas decorations and the like. So that was and they said they understood and moved forward. And then as the project progressed, I know Mr. Fordyce spent a significant amount of time working with them, and they were the electrical engineers were. Or engineer was attempting a couple different methodologies throughout the whole process, and at the end of the day, it was not accomplished. And we sat down and said, well, the changes that were made, who made those decisions? And of course, AECOM said, well, we did. And we said, well, did the city direct you to do that? Well, no, they didn't. So I said, well, we need to fix it, and you are responsible for it. And they did agree. And so, however, so that they've made that correction, and the electrical outlets are working properly, and so it's a little over $4,000 is the cost, but they've agreed to pay that full amount with the increase, but of course they want a release form from the city to do that, and so that's before you is to consider approval of the release form, and then AECOM then would write the city a check for that amount.
Questions for the city manager? Ms. Dillon?
I just wanted to follow up on the email I sent you earlier.
Yes, and so the question that Ms. Dillon had asked me is, is it working properly? Because there are some of the recently the hung Christmas wreaths with the lights on them. Some were not working, and I confirmed with Mr. Fordyce today. They are working, except that the problem was a timer, and so the timer has been bypassed, and so all the lights all the electrical outlets are working. So we have to repair the timer. So that's the long-winded question or answer is that yes, they are working.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions, Mr. Gearbox?
So in follow-up to that, is AECOM responsible for fixing that timer?
I don't believe that. We go back and forth with those timers.
Okay.
So.
I just want to make sure if it was part of this.
No, absolutely.
Fix
Yeah,
it.
no, we've had challenges with the timers throughout the years.
Okay.
Additional questions? And there's a motion on the floor moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearbox to acknowledge receipt. We'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion now to approve or not to approve the AECOM release and settlement agreement, to authorize or not authorize the city manager to sign the agreement?
Move to approve and authorize.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbox. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Discussion. Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business, item 17-191, appointment of interim police chief. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 6, 2017 memo from City Manager Campbell and to approve or not to approve the appointment of Sergeant Andrew Hartwig as interim police chief, traffic engineer, and deputy treasurer as of 4 p.m. on November 14, 2017, and to approve or not to approve the letter of agreement between the City of Saline and the Command Officers Association of Michigan, and to authorize or not authorize the city manager to sign the agreement.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and authorize.
Second.
Moved by CO to acknowledge, approve, and authorize, and that was seconded by Councilmember Gearbox. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Campbell, do you care to comment at all?
Sure, I'll be trying to be brief, but so Sergeant Hartwig, if you could come forward, please, in case there's any questions. But so certainly, as we know, we're going through the process to replace outgoing Chief Rinnick. As we sat down and looked at the process and knew that at least for a short time we would need an interim chief. And last time, 5.5 years ago, we went out and found a retired deputy chief from a different department that came in and did the job. And as I talked with Chief Rinnick, and we came up with a determination that we think that Sergeant Hartwig is certainly up for the task. Sergeant Hartwig began as a road patrol officer in 2001 with Saline. December of 2013 promoted to sergeant. He meets the minimum education requirements with a bachelor's degree, as well as the office School of Staff and Command for police. And he's had a myriad of different assignments while he's been here with Saline, whether it's field training officer, now actually heading up the FTO program. He's a firearms instructor. He's, I think for a short term, did the cadet program. He's also currently takes on the detective responsibilities as well. But very well respected by fellow officers, and I think he will do a great job. Again, hoping that we will, well, certainly I think he's capable and will do a great job. I'm hoping that the new chief will be on board, within 60 days or less. So, but that's, be happy to do our best to, for me to answer any questions, or for Sergeant Hartwig, if you have any questions for him.
Well, before we open it up for questions, Sergeant Hartwig, we welcome you here this evening. Is there any comment that you would like to make?
Well, thank you for welcoming me here. And I just want to let you know I have full confidence in the police department. We've got a very deep well of experience and expertise in the department. There are several of us that can be the caretaker temporarily while we're awaiting the appointment of the new chief. And I certainly feel capable to take care of the department during that time.
Very good. Appreciate those comments. Questions or comments for Sergeant Hartwig or for the city manager? Ms. Dillon?
This is for Mr. Campbell. How does this impact staffing in the police department? So you're going to be down a sergeant and down a detective?
Well, no, he'll be continuing to be serving a supervisory capacity. So he's been the day sergeant for the last several months. So he'll continue to take on those administrative roles during the day as well. We talked about that, this time management and to get things done, and he believes that he told me he believes he can accomplish what he needs to accomplish and continue moving the department forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Sergeant Hartwig, thank you.
Thank you.
Subsequent discussion on the motion. Just that I'd echo the city manager's comments that Sergeant Hartwig has served this community with great distinction since 2001. I think he's more than capable of serving as caretaker of the department for the next several weeks. We wish you luck, and I know that the city manager and your fellow officers will support you in any reasonable way that they can. So good luck, my friend. We'll proceed to vote then. It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Gearbaugh to acknowledge, to approve, and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 17-192. I'm going to handle this one a little bit differently, my friends. I'm going to put the formal Roberts Rule of Parliamentary Procedure aside, and before I entertain a motion, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, your individual thoughts, about last Thursday's interviews, the candidates who you are partial to, and if you also care to comment on the process, I would be happy to hear your thoughts and opinions as well. Last Thursday, I started to my left with Councilwoman Mitchell. She, of course, is not here this evening, but she did provide the city manager and I with some comments that I'm going to read. You have them for me? Okay, very good. But I did tip my friend, Councilmember CO, off, and I'm going to begin with him this evening. So, Jack, do you want to comment about last Thursday's interviews, the process, and who you would recommend as the next police chief?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because of the gravity of the situation, I've committed my remarks to writing, and I would like to share those musings with you now.
Absolutely. I'm very partial to prepared written statements, so we'd be delighted to hear your thoughts.
Unlike most issues that come to council for a decision, this one has no recommendation attached to it. Rather, it is up to us as councilpersons to exercise our judgment and authority to make a selection on our own, having heard and seen both candidates, some of us several times prior to this evening. As I am sure my council colleagues do, I must take this responsibility very seriously. So I share with you the things that I have considered since last we met on this matter. First, Jared Hart. Mr. Hart has risen to the rank of Assistant Chief of Police of the Novi Police Department. He has served at that agency alone during his career and cites that as a sign of his loyalty to the organization, that being one of his strengths. We are seeking a person who will give us some certainty of length of service, as this police chief search is an expensive and time-consuming exercise to go through. If we select the right person, a permanence in the position would also be a good thing for the organization, giving the personnel of the department some sort of continuity of vision for the future. Mr. Hart has gone through the EMU School of Police Staff and Command and has attended numerous other professional trainings. He has a master's degree. He has been active in his community and cites several programs that he's been active with in engaging with the Novi community. He also has come across to me as a person very excited about the challenge and opportunity to take on the mantle of Saline Police Chief, as evidenced by his many visits to the area and his attempts to understand the Saline community through those visits. Second, we have Jeff Lewis. Mr. Lewis has served as the Chief of Police of Milam Police Department and as Director of Public Safety at Muskegon Police Department. He knows the role of Chief of Police, is experienced from the chair behind the desk of that office. He has a variety of police experiences, having worked at Ypsilanti PD, Milam PD, and now at Muskegon PD. Mr. Lewis has attended the Northwest University School of Police Staff and Command and has attended the FBI National Academy. He too has attended numerous other professional trainings. He has also served for 2 years as a co-director of the EMU School of Police Staff and Command, and he too has a master's degree. He has been active in the communities where he has lived and has engaged within those communities. He was raised in Saline and is familiar with the area not only from his upbringing, but also from his service as the Chief of Police of Milan and adjacent community. I am impressed by the fact that Mr. Lewis has successfully led the Muskegon Department of Public Safety for the last 6 years. I've spent a good deal of time in Muskegon County during his tenure, as that is where I keep my boat and spend a good deal of time every summer. I also subscribe to the area newspaper and keep up with the community news. The job he has is not an easy one, and Mr. Lewis has obviously been able to perform it in a very good fashion, or he would not have lasted this long there. On paper, both men appear to be excellent candidates for the position. I've had Saline community members comment positively on behalf of both of them. This, therefore, is not a straightforward decision with one of the candidates clearly more qualified than the other. Both have nearly equal educational and training credentials, with Mr. Lewis barely edging out Mr. Hart in terms of training, having attended the FBI National Academy. That, in my view, is not an essential credential, being on par with the School of Police Staff and Command. Due to his length of service in his various positions, Mr. Lewis appears to have had more practical experience than Mr. Hart in police work. In the end, however, I am most taken with the ardor with which Mr. Hart presents himself and the way he speaks of his very strong desire to become the next chief of the Saline Police Department. He is an excellent communicator and speaks well in public. He has spent much time and effort to learn about Saline. I was impressed with his approach to the interviewing process. I believe he would easily ingratiate himself with the Saline Police Department and the Saline community. Although I don't feel we could go wrong with either man as chief, at this time, I would cast my vote for Mr. Jared Hart. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. That was a very thoughtful, well-prepared statement. I appreciate those remarks. Councilwoman Dillon.
Wow. It's a pretty big one to follow. Can I just go with like ditto or something like that? I wanted to just start by just saying that I'm new to the process, and so I was a little taken back by how this happened, and I had sort of expected the Mercer Group to give more of a formal recommendation as well as the work group, since they had the wealth of experience, and that's why they were chosen to be on it. And I appreciate them leaving us to our own thoughts and decisions. It would have been nice, in my opinion, to have had, especially the professional side of it beforehand. That being said, with only being presented with 2 candidates rather than 3, I thought both were very fine choices and would be excellent additions to Saline. But at the end, I would favor Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
I also have prepared comments, if I may read them, please.
Absolutely. You don't even need to ask.
In Deputy Chief Hart and in Chief Lewis, I believe we have 2 highly qualified, outstanding candidates for this position. And I think that is, in my mind, having gone through the process on the search committee, is evidence of a very valid, serious, and carefully carried out process. I believe that each of them has the potential to be a real asset to the police department and the city. Each of them presented himself very well. They do have somewhat different styles. I think both styles could work in our department and our city. Both of them presented themselves professionally, appropriately, and they were both very engaged in the interview. Their backgrounds and experience showed different paths. Chief Lewis has moved from agency to gain new responsibilities and experience. On the other hand, Deputy Chief Hart's career has been an arc of new responsibilities and positions within the same agency. Both approaches can be very effective, and they've given each of the candidates experience and background that I believe are directly relevant to the position. Each of them has also continued to pursue professional development through education and training. Chief Lewis has somewhat more experience as an instructor trainer. Their communication styles differ somewhat as well. And both of them understood implications of questions that we asked, and they were effective in their responses. I would say that both of them also, or each of them, perhaps were stronger on some questions than others, but I think there was a good balance and that they were both effective. Chief Lewis has a track record as a chief. Deputy Chief Hart's track record is in a full progression of positions, and he seems to me to be poised to take the next step and become a police chief. In terms of their administration abilities and their capabilities for leading and directing others, both of them have substantial, successful track records of getting things done. Chief Lewis's record is longer and more varied, but both of them have substantial track records. I'll also note that references for both of them were outstanding. Each of them expressed an interest in being a presence in the community, a visible presence of the community, and being integrated into the community. Chief Lewis already knows Saline very well. Deputy Chief Hart, as Mr. Seo mentioned, has also clearly done a great deal of research and exploration of the community. So I would be delighted to see either one as our police chief. Having said that, I would like to see us reach out first to Deputy Chief Hart. I note his expressed interest in coming to Saline for the long term, and I believe that the city and the department would benefit from that long-term intention and loyalty. I also believe that he would come here with fresh eyes and great enthusiasm. My one concern is that he might have a somewhat idealized view of the city, and we might not really be as good as he thinks we are. And I do regret that we hadn't had the Celtic Festival report ahead of time, or else we could have asked both of them the kilt question. But my preference is to go with reaching out to Deputy Chief Hart.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Again, very thoughtful, pointed statement. Appreciate it very much. Councilmember Gearbox.
First, I'd like to thank all the effort that the mayor and the search committee put into their care and consideration in bringing forward the 2 candidates that they identified as being the ones that we would interview as a council. It's a difficult approach. I've been in many search committees, and I've been in very many other aspects in terms of how we've hired city managers and other police chief. And it's a difficult task, and when you get down to it, it's really trying to figure out who fits best in our community. I think both candidates, Mr. Lewis has his experience from not only a local community, but all of our area and being a Saline boy, Saline Town individual. I think he has a number of aspects to which he's accredited to in terms of how he's dealt with problems in his own past, in terms of how officers or individual circumstances have come about. I believe Mr. Hart, with his 26 years of experience in a very, what I would say, growing community, which is of what Novi is, going from what a very small, rural area 26 years ago to a very large populated community experiencing many, many attributes of what we will be experiencing, and I know in the next 10 years, because of all the concerns that are being pressured on us from Ann Arbor and other growing communities. And his enthusiasm, I think, is what really impressed all of us on council, but also it was sort of the type of thing that he was so engaged in the schools and with the individual students and so forth that I saw that as being an aspect of which kind of brought him to the top. When I'm looking at for a police chief is leadership. As we know, that is a dedicated aspect to which we need to be able to handle, and the individual must be able to have a demeanor and an ability to approach anyone, either a citizen, a staff member, or one of us on council, which I know can be a trip in itself. So in my situation, I am supporting Deputy Chief Hart also.
Well said. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Councilwoman McClellan.
I have the privilege of going last and hearing all your wonderful comments. So I just want to first of all express my appreciation for the hard work of the committee and the Mercer Group for providing us with two. I know there was hope that we would have more, but I think the two that we ended up with were outstanding. Would be happy with either one of them. Very qualified candidates. Having had the privilege of hearing from both of them last Thursday, I would again like to echo the comments of all of my colleagues who say it more eloquently than I probably ever could. I appreciated hearing their experience and what they have to offer, and different communication styles, I will agree. But the things that stood out to me for Mr. Hart, who is my recommendation, were, I just wrote down a few single word phrases when he was speaking that kind of stuck out to me, were strong community, selfless, positive, responsible, approachable. I liked his approach to the drug crisis and knowing that that is a major issue and how he would approach that. I really appreciated. And then just his hands-on willingness to work with our community and his enthusiasm. So Mr. Hart would be my recommendation.
Very good. Well, before I make a statement, let me read to you the email that Councilwoman Mitchell provided to both city manager and I this morning at around 10 a.m. And I'm quoting now. I prefer Chief Hart as a candidate. He had more concrete suggestions during the interviews and had put some research into our local businesses beforehand that was evident during his comments. In addition, his management methods sound like a better fit for our force. So clearly, Councilwoman Mitchell also prefers Deputy Chief Hart. First of all, I want to congratulate each of you on the dais, because I thought that the face-to-face interviews last Thursday went very, very well. In large part because of the excellent diversity of our questions. And those questions were made stronger by the fact that each council member asked questions on subjects that they were particularly passionate about. So I say well done to each of you. The other statement that I would make, and for those of you who were around in 2012, this is not news to you, but I was part of the interviewing process 5.5 years ago. I did not chair the hiring committee, but I was part of the hiring committee. And as I stated on Thursday, it's clear that the pool and diversity of candidates was much stronger in 2017 than it was in 2012, although we had some outstanding applicants in 2012. The difference between 2012 and 2017 for myself was I went into the final interview and into that council meeting where we entertained a motion to hire a new police chief with a very, very strong and emphatic opinion. And that's meant as no disrespect to the candidate that we did not hire, but I felt very, very passionately about Chief Rennick at that time. And so what makes 2017 different is that I can easily see both of these two gentlemen fitting in and accomplishing something tangible for our department and for our city. But I do like the comments that were made by Mr. Gearbaugh, which is that this really does come down to leadership and who is capable of taking our police department to the next level. And while on paper, I think I scored Mr. Lewis maybe a hair ahead of Deputy Chief Hart, I have absolutely no doubt that Deputy Chief Hart will do an outstanding job. I look forward to working with him, and I'll be joining my colleagues in what I believe will be a unanimous motion to offer the position to Mr. Hart. Is there anything anyone else on council would like to add? That could have been a lot more painful, folks. It's good that there was cohesion and consensus. Well, at this time, then, the chair would entertain a motion to make a conditional offer of employment for the position of police chief to Jared Hart, conditioned upon a satisfactory completion of background investigation and physical and drug screenings, and to direct the city manager to negotiate an employment contract with Mr. Jared Hart.
So moved.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, seconded by Councilmember Seal. I do want to add one more thing. And I was going to say this regardless of who we chose to be our next police chief. As it relates to Chief Lewis from the Muskegon Public Safety Department, clearly he has served the people of Ypsilanti, the people of Milan, the people of Muskegon with great distinction. And I want to be very emphatic about this. Our society, our state needs more people like that who will devote a lifetime to preserving and protecting the safety and the character and cohesion of our community. So I applaud him for his sacrifice and his service, and I wish him nothing but the best in his future endeavors.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to add something to your remarks. I think the success of these people who come in the future stand on the shoulders of those who precede them.
Absolutely.
So I want to say thank you, Chief Rennick, for your years of service here and your previous police experience. I think you've done an admirable job here. I applaud your work.
Anything further? Then it's been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, seconded by Councilmember Seo, to offer a conditional employment offer to Deputy Chief Hart of Novi, and to direct the city manager to negotiate an employment contract. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Obviously, you'll keep us in the loop because we want to move as expeditiously as possible. We want to be thorough, but we want to move expeditiously.
Yes, sir.
Very good. We move on to the last action item of the evening, which is 17-193. This is Vector truck purchase. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 9th, 2017 memo from City Manager Campbell and to approve or not to approve the resolution authorizing execution and delivery of an installment purchase agreement. Tied up on that one, I'm sorry.
Move to acknowledge and to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. Mr. Fordyce, do you care to make any comment this evening?
Thank you. Another repeat item of sorts. Council previously took action on authorizing purchase of a Vector, and then we had our city attorneys review the proposed purchase mechanism and found some details that need to be ironed out. So before you, we have 40 pages of details that have been ironed out. Apparently, a local government taking out a car loan is not as simple as an individual taking out a car loan. So What we bring back to you tonight is the same purchase, same identical piece of equipment, same price, better financing, and more paperwork. So that's the gist of it.
Are there any questions for Mr. Fordyce? Mr. Girma?
No question, but a statement. It's funny that, yeah, we're saving a percent point, but I think you probably spent enough time in to make up that cost.
Well, it is a percentage point on almost $400,000.
Right.
So I haven't done the math to see how it all works out, but this is a vital piece of equipment, and we really do need it, so.
Good job on it.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Dillon?
What is your time frame for receiving?
We had a closing date proposed of November 29th, and the unit is either ready right now or will be ready like within a week. It's an existing unit that's on the lot, so once this loan is closed and we can get the money in the right hands, then we'll have the new piece of equipment.
And what are we doing with our current Vector?
Current one is going to be auctioned.
Okay. Does it have value?
It does. And it might be significant in the $90,000, $100,000 range. So we're anxious to get that auctioned and bring that money back in.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I have a question too. And presumably the paperwork has undergone the scrutiny of the city attorney and we're now all okay?
The majority of it was prepared by our city attorney.
You wrote it.
Okay, good. That's good enough for me. Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you, Mr. Fordyce. Subsequent discussion on the motion. Then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by McClellan to acknowledge receipt to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda this evening. First is commission, committee, or task force reports from council members. Mr. Hart.
Yes, just an update for the non-discrimination ordinance draft work group. Some comments were received, passed along and discussed with Mr. Smith, who is currently working on some revisions that we've agreed to. Additional questions have arisen, so we continue to revise.
Very good. Keep us in the loop. Let us know what we can do to be helpful to keep this moving along, because it is a priority to get it considered and passed, but we appreciate everyone's work. Additional committee, commissioner, task force reports. How about reports or other announcements? Well then, Mr. Skull, you're up. Wastewater treatment plant update.
Well, since my last update 2 weeks ago, we've had the soil borings were completed, the surveying was completed. They gave us some initial preliminary drawings showing the ductwork, as well as the placement of the generator at the lift station and the odor unit at the Southside lift station. Things are proceeding. They're not proceeding as quickly as everybody would like, but they are on track. In addition, we do have the sludge haulers in, so you will see some tanker trucks moving back and forth. They were in the last week of October, but at that time there weren't enough fields cleared to handle all the volume, so they came back over the weekend. And so you may see some tanker trucks moving down, hopefully the appropriate roads.
Thanks.
Any odor complaints besides the one that I forwarded to you from Mr. Roth?
No, sir.
Yeah, there's been a couple that I forwarded you.
I thought that was just a reissue of that one. I apologize then.
Okay, so 3 or 4 maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Skull?
Just real quick.
Please, and then Mr. McClellan.
Nova filters?
Yes. We had an issue about a week and a half ago, but it was minor. It was repaired within a day. Since then, they've been operating.
What's the longest we've had those operating without a problem?
4 weeks.
4 weeks? We've made a month, huh?
Yeah.
Progress.
Yeah. Advancing the ball.
Thank you.
Ms. McClellan?
Just, this is kind of sound like a crazy question, but what day was that, Linda, that it was, at my house, it smelled like dill pickles?
Dill
Because I was just like, I don't know if it's that's a water treatment plant issue or something else, but
Yeah,
I
early
just
in the
figured I
month
would
last
bring it
week.
up.
Yeah.
Last week it was, I
Yeah.
think it was,
I
I didn't know if you guys
Again,
were
we
using
we
vinegar.
have some odors, the odor scrubber's not working correctly. I have not heard dill pickles before,
It was a new
but
one.
I know in the springtime, we will get, coming off the fields, from the farmer's fields, you'll get a certain smell of, smells like rotting radishes to me.
yeah.
I wouldn't say dill pickles, but
Dill pickles, just.
Yeah, last Wednesday
Better
was,
than
last
better.
Wednesday was when the smell was really strong, even here at City Hall and Bennett Street, so.
okay.
The email from Mr. Roth, I believe, was from Thursday afternoon.
I save of all of them. I
Yeah,
just didn't.
but I think that was that
That was-
certainly was not a dill pickle smell. That was
Okay.
more of a fecal matter smell on par with something you should pick up from the wastewater treatment plant. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Scull. Mr. Fordyce, I believe you're going to be providing an update on water system vibrations, in particular in my neck of the woods, Long Bennett, Highland, Hollywood.
We have been having an ongoing issue with vibrating pipes in homes. They've been kind of concentrated in the northwest quadrant of the city. There've been some in Northview area along Bennett Street, recently stretching down Mills a little bit, Breckenshire, and a few instances on North Ann Arbor, kind of forming this circle around the water plant. Our first attempt at controlling this, operating under a theory that we have excessive air in the water mains in that area, and that is the geographically highest part of the city, so it makes sense that air would move in that direction. We attempted several rounds of flushing and saw some temporary relief. Then we installed several automatic air relief valves. Flushing is not a great way to get air out of mains because of the way hydrants are attached, and they're not attached at the top of the pipe, so you don't necessarily get all the air out by flushing. We installed these air release valves and again saw a mitigation. We saw a reduction in complaints, both the frequency of complaints and the intensity of the reported vibration, but it has not gone away. I think it was 2 weeks ago, Foreman Ryan Marion organized a number of our crew members and homeowners and property managers, and we had them stationed in different basements across the city, across this affected part of the city. And Bob Scull and I were at the plant turning various things on and turning things off and switching controls and, doing, a variety of different scenarios of plant operation. And none of them seemed to have any impact on the vibration issue. Initially, we had no vibration going on no matter what we were doing in the plant. And then when we switched back to, autopilot at the plant, then we had some vibration. So then we ran through the whole thing again, shutting things off, switching pumps, and the plant operation seemed to have no measurable impact. So we're back to the air in the mains, and what air does naturally occur in water mains. Dissolved air is a component of water, and under certain pressure situations, it will undissolve and become a gas again. Very much like you open a can of pop, all the gas comes bubbling out. It's much less dramatic than that with groundwater, but that dissolved air is a component in there. So where we go from here is not 100% clear to me. One of the issues with the air relief valves that we installed is that they are not in ideal locations. They're in the best locations available to us right now, but they're not in ideal locations. An ideal location would be where a water main comes up and then goes back down. And we do have a number of those locations, but they're underground. So to install an air relief valve on those, we need to do an excavation and install a gate well. And it's a time-consuming and pricey endeavor. But I think that might be what we need to do. I do want to try to find some way of measuring this phenomenon and reaching out to some experts and getting some additional ideas. But so we've reduced it, but we haven't eliminated it. And so I take hope from the methods that we've used so far, and that if we expand the use of those and get these valves installed in the ideal locations, that we may be able to eliminate this.
Once you connect with some experts and, evaluate best practices, when do you suspect that you'd come back to us with sort of a formal plan on how we can resolve this matter? A couple months?
Probably less than that, but,
Okay.
but yeah, somewhere in that neck of the woods.
Is it helpful to still encourage our residents, our constituents, to contact the Department of Public Works when they experience a problem?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. We've been recording all of those, and we've been mapping them out.
Just call the main number?
Yep.
Okay, very good. All right. Questions for our DPW Director? Ms. Dillon?
So when is this this is happening inside of homes? When they
Yes.
turn on their faucets, or is it just a buildup of air in their lines? So,
What the air does is increase the potential for water hammer. So water itself is essentially non-compressible, so as it moves through the pipes and it stops moving, it just stops. But if you have air in there, which is compressible, you'll have a bubble, and then this body of water will move against the bubble will squish down, and then it'll re-expand, and it'll push the water back away. And what we think is happening is that there's so many bubbles that this water hammer is now becoming a vibration. So a normal water hammer situation is like 1 or 2 bangs of your pipe, and then it stops. But with air distributed throughout this part of the distribution system, we think it's just happening on this smaller level and creating this vibration. So it does not matter in the houses whether water's running or not. The pipes will vibrate. We have found that if you close the main valve by the water meter, that will eliminate the vibration. Of course, it also eliminates your water service, so it's not a good solution. So the source of the vibration is out in the distribution. It's not in the houses themselves, and it's not necessarily a water or an air buildup in their own piping.
so scale 1 to 10, how's this affecting quality of life for people? I mean, is it really intrusive? Is it just slightly annoying?
It's all over the scale, yeah. There certainly have been people who have been woken up by it, and there's other people who, when asked, they're like, now that you mention it, I guess there is some buzzing going on. So it's all over the board.
Mr. Gearbold, please.
Was it made more progressively worse after the Houghton project, the old Houghton School project was added on, or was it always there?
Well, we have experienced this once before. It was much less persistent, once in my tenure at DPW. It was much less persistent that time, and we were able to do some flushing, and the problem went away within a week or so. This one has lingered for, I think, 2 months now.
But it just started within the last couple of months, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't see any timing issue with the
And of course, it's more widespread than just that vicinity. If you're saying it's going to Northview subdivision.
right, yeah.
Okay, I was thinking it was just in the Bennett and the Highland area, so.
No,
okay.
it's north of the
North.
waterfall.
That's where I
as well.
first received complaints, was
Yeah.
Hollywood, Highland,
Got it.
Bennett, but
Okay, so it's more
apparently it's more
system-wide.
widespread.
Yeah.
Okay, well, keep us in the loop on this. It is important to a number of our residents.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll probably be asked about it on Wednesday at the senior center, so I'll be able to provide an update.
right.
Thank you for your work on this, Jeff. If there's nothing further on water system vibrations, we'll move on to a brief update on the strategic plan. Mr. Campbell, and I believe a hard copy or an electronic copy was distributed as part of your packet.
Correct. I'll be very brief in that, as I've done in the past, I mean, the updates are in yellow. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if anybody has them.
Any questions for Mr. Campbell regarding the strategic plan? No? Ms. Dillon?
Just quickly, what happened to the tasks beyond year 1? Didn't we have up to like 5 years of tasks at one point? Those
2
sort
and
of-
3.
2 and 3?
Correct. Some, well, not all of them did, but most of them have 2 and 3 year.
Okay.
Have 1 year, 2 year, 3 year.
New
Okay.
consultant, too.
Pardon?
New consultant.
That was a change from,
There's a change in our consultant
Yeah.
Right.
approach.
Okay.
can't think of the first gentleman, but probably Bender.
Start with you.
Lou Bender, Mr. Bender. Additional questions, comments?
Can I just-
Oh, please.
Just a comment. I appreciated receiving it in this format with all of the updates highlighted, so it's easy to scan.
Good.
Easy to take in the information that way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then last up is Rec Center Project Change Order. Mr. Campbell, are you taking the lead on this with maybe some assistance from Director Scruggs?
Absolutely. So
And a guest?
And a
Oh,
guest.
very good.
So Carla and Andy Riley with a long E, right? Yes. So from Mays, and just to reiterate from my memo that I sent out, we have a change order about $31,895, somewhere in that area, I think, for a handful of items that needed to be done. And as unfortunately, as it's a couple times in the past I've had to do, I guess, which is fortunate, but that we didn't want to stop production, especially because of the weather too, as we're losing good days for sure as we go on. But we have some changes that needed to be done or being done for the roof project at the rec center, and so I thought it would be better to have Andy here from Mays to go through the detail. I've provided you with a very thorough detail with photos and such, but he can certainly kind of present quickly the technical aspects and then answer any questions going forward.
As a quick overview, in the original project, we included allowances for things that we'd uncover when the old roof comes off that have to be addressed before the new roof goes on, such as painting or replacing steel deck or structure that is exposed as part of the removing the old roof and putting the new roof on. And these allowances are tracked on a daily basis by our guy on site and the contractor, and it's usually by the square foot, depending on what it is. And we started off above the swimming pool, which is pretty much the worst area for the condition of the steel that we're exposing. And we needed this change order because our original allowance was not enough, and so we needed to put some more. As I treat allowances kind of like banks. We write the change order for the full amount so it's available, because it's an item that we need to make the decision first thing in the morning, because they have to put the roof back on before they leave at the end of the day. So we wanted to have the approval to address and paint things that are exposed, and we were running into more painting than we had originally allowed for. But we aren't, the good thing is we're not replacing as much deck as we had allowed for. And when I wrote this letter, we were about 40% done with the roof, and we'd used almost all of our allowance for the painting. Now we're 50% plus or minus done with the roof. And we've to date painted almost, not quite 5,000 square feet of the deck. We've painting, when I say paint, anything that's got rust scale on it, they wire brush it and we prime and paint it. So that, it's almost not quite double what we'd allowed for. But the good news is the worst was right about the time I wrote this letter, which was when we were at the transition from the natatorium pool area to the gym space, and that's the area that the condensation occurred. So that's the worst deck, and after today, actually, the deck is kind of clearing up. So I think we've got plenty of money now, and this is money that was set aside in the contingency. And so looking at this number, and I also created a couple more allowances for when we take the wall panels off, if we run into anything we want to paint. I have had the contractor break it down into linear footages that our guy can track. And again, these are allowances, so if we need them, it's already available. But if we don't use them, then I'll write a change order, and it comes back out of the contract. If that makes sense.
Director Scruggs, anything you'd like to add?
No, other than I've been very pleased with Mays Consulting. Our on-site supervisor, Ben Sohar, has done an outstanding job making sure, I mean, he's there as soon as the contractors are on site, and he doesn't leave until the contractors are gone. Texts me every day when he comes in and texts me every night when he leaves. He's caught a couple of things that if we didn't have someone on site, we may have gotten maybe some substandard workmanship. He's done an excellent job. CEI, our roofing contractor, according to Ben and to Andy, they've done an outstanding job. Their on-site supervisor is top-notch. They're doing really quality work, and the place has been clean. Safety of our customers has been their first priority, and we've been very pleased.
Well, let me echo those comments, because I'm generally at the facility maybe 5 days a week, and I've been impressed, and I've shared this sentiment with the city manager and with our Parks and Rec director. I've been impressed by the professionalism and dedication of everybody who's on site there. Was particularly impressed, I think it was 2 Saturdays ago at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, there was still a full crew working. So your dedication is commendable, and I think it's a priority for the city and this council to resolve this matter thoroughly, but also expeditiously. So appreciate your time this evening. Are there questions for our guest, Director Scruggs, or for the city manager? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Appreciate the pictures that you placed with the change order information. I'm looking at the allowance number 2 and the damage of what was the one picture where it shows placing the deck and where it's so deteriorated. How much of the deck was like that? I didn't realize, and now I am more confident what we did was right.
Yeah.
How bad that really was.
And that's that area is in the front above there's an overhang. And at the last roof project, somebody had overlaid the existing bad decking. So the piece that's being peeled up was the second time somebody had done that. So what we did is the stuff that's really bad, that got cut off, the edges got painted, and then we put new decking, but our new decking actually spans 3 bar joists, not just 2.
Okay.
So structurally it's better. And anything that's rusty, we paint. We just don't cover it up. So we've replaced to date almost 700 square feet of deck.
So was this deterioration due to the fact that it had that second decking on top of it and progressively made it
What
even
was
look worse?
going on there is that the warm, moist pool air was getting into that space, and it was basically eating that steel from the underside up.
So it's a design issue. Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
Director
Thank
Scruggs,
you.
thank you for your leadership on this. If there's nothing further to be brought up during the discussion portion of tonight's agenda, we'll move on to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess. I just got out of one meeting, so in June, I started the idea of having a searchlight for our church Christmas Eve services at the Saline Methodist Church. After asking the city, I was told that the request did not comply with the city sign code. Then was given a sheet of approximate costs of $650 to get an appeal or variance from the ZBA Commission. Since this is not a permanent request, I still believe that that was an improper direction. Then it was advised to ask for an amendment of the sign ordinance, section 12.03, from the Saline City Code Task Force. A letter was submitted on my behalf, and Pat Little, chairman, received it. I was notified it would be on the November 30th agenda. I paid $200 on October 15th towards the $600 cost of the searchlight to hold the Christmas Eve event. On November 3rd, I had the privilege of meeting with council members CO, McClellan, and DeHar at an open coffee hour. All three council members at that time agreed that this request would fit as a community event. I went straight away to City Hall for the event application. To fit within the 45-day time limit, I filled out a request at that point and submitted it to City Hall on November 6th. Then another copy was filled out by my pastor, Tom Zimmerman. Another copy of the event request was filled out, as I said, by the pastor. When I presented it to Mayor Morrow during a discussion on November 9th to put on the November 13th agenda to receive and discuss its merits, Mayor Morrow felt that this would not be an appropriate. Therefore, I am requesting that it now be received and please discussed. Mr. Har is on the Code Enforcement Commission, and I would hope I have to, December 3rd, pay another $200 to hold the Christmas Eve position for this event. It is true that as far as the light in the sky was a sign for the event of Christ's birth. So in retrospect, you're right. I do have the original application from the Methodist Church. Oh, and my 3 minutes are up. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional comments this evening? No additional comments. Well, please note upcoming meetings, and the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at, looks like 9:51 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearbaugh. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned.